everybody. Hope everybody's doing good. We are back with another edition of KC Music Talk. I see my awesome sign there. It's pretty awesome. We are here today with a teacher here in Kansas City, Bridget Clonts. How you doing?
Great. How are you?
Pretty
Good to be
awesome.
here.
So anybody who doesn't know you, tell them a little bit about your kind of history playing music and teaching and stuff for people that don't know you.
Yeah. So I came to UMKC, or I started my music career at UMKC as a student in 2006, and I've been here ever since. I got my bachelor's degree and master's degree from the UMKC Conservatory. After I graduated in 2012, I decided to set up shop here in Kansas City. So I started a studio. I freelance as a musician, and I do a good deal of outreach among the musician community and with young students as well. So I have my fingers in different areas as a lot of musicians who freelance do. So I've been doing that since 2012. What's that? 6 years now,
Yeah.
and loving it. Just living in Kansas City has been a great experience. There's a lot of support for the arts. There's a lot of musicians here. There's a lot of collaboration that goes on. And when I was getting done with my degree, I was trying to figure out, should I stay? Should I go? And seeing a lot of my other colleagues who had left and come back to Kansas City because the arts are so strong here made me, make that decision to stay. And it's been a good one.
Yeah, that's cool. Don't feel bad about talking to me. Don't worry about those guys. The cameras, screw those guys. No, but that's really cool because I know a lot of people have that moment where they're in a town, whatever the town is, and they're like us, and they're very artsy, and they want to either teach or play, and then they're sitting here looking around, and they're like, "Can I do that here?" And that's what happened to me in Wichita, where I was sitting there, and I'm like, man, besides for the school, what is here?
Yeah.
And it's nothing. So I was like, so when I came up here, I was pleasantly surprised, and I already knew from going to high school here about how many, how much music is infiltrated the schools and stuff, like high schools and stuff. So I knew it was already strong, but I was pleasantly surprised at all of the band scene here and the amount of live music and definitely the amount of teachers.
Yeah.
So that's cool. You and I are obviously very, very similar in what we're trying to do, because coming from school, from a degree, and then realizing the amount of support that there is here. And so you've been doing something really cool. Like I got introduced to you by Eric Haskell, I think, and he explained to me this little music teacher get-together thing that you've started. So talk about your little thing that you've started.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's for more than just teachers, although I would say probably 80% of the people that come to the roundtable teach. 20% are either trying to get their foot into the gig scene as a musician, or they're trying to network with other musicians to collaborate with. So I started it out of a realization that sometimes in Kansas City there's a divide between different groups of musicians, and it doesn't even have to be different genres. I mean, I know classical musicians who don't know other classical musicians in town. And I try to be a connector as much as possible. And so the reason that I started with that was partly to help connect the musicians in town, and then but also to give them a safe space where they could talk about issues relating to their career and troubleshoot, bounce off ideas between each other in a very structured format. Because when musicians get together, they're not always good about staying on topic. So this roundtable was a great opportunity for something that I didn't think really existed, or does exist in that many places, a structured meeting for musicians to talk about just problems that they have. I mean, it could be pedagogical, like what you're dealing with your students. It could be like, hey man, I don't know how to do my taxes this year. What forms do I use? So yeah, I mean, it's been good. We've been going for about, I want to say 2 years now.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's really neat. Yeah, I know when because I came to one of them, and the whole concept of the group was really cool to me, and like this is like you were kind of saying on the phone, this is a thing that's kind of needed in town. And it was funny you mentioned people staying on topic, because I probably did that when I came. I was like, man, I'm not really interested in what you guys are trying to talk about today. I have issues.
Yeah.
I'm like, I need this. I need help. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
that's what it's there for too.
Right.
You know, just a support group.
Yeah, and I love that you. Just on a side note, you were talking about like taxes and stuff. I mean, really the keeping track of your whole business. You know, that's a whole thing in of itself that everybody doesn't care about, you know, and some people get on top of that and some people don't, and that's a whole like there's so many of these topics that's really good to have a group like that. And I think again, this is where I think you and I are getting really similar, where that's kind of the purpose of the show, just in a different sort of format, is to try to get some more teachers and musicians in here and talk out some of these issues. Now on the show a little bit, you know, for you were talking about the idea of kind of a safe space, and I'm trying to like basically get people in trouble and put them out, you know, trying to, you know, I just think that's kind of funny. But I love what you were talking about the fact that we sometimes think we're alone sort of in these annoyances of having students or gigging, and then what happens when we get together with 6 other people?
Right, we all have the same problems. Yeah.
So like, and so you were talking about, what's your opinion about having an outlet for yourself as a teacher? Like, so you're talking about an outlet for other teachers to kind of vent and get, what's your opinion of having like a literal like playing outlet?
You mean, so you're talking about like when I want to play music?
Well, I'm talking about, so we're in this teaching mode, and we're sitting here for months on end, you know, just teach, and then you were talking about the one kind of an outlet where we get together with teachers and have this venting, you know, nice little accidental venting session, you know, but the other, I've heard a lot of people talk about that they wish they had an actual playing outlet. Like Eric talks about his, is it Topeka Symphony or no, St. Joe? Yeah, one of them. But he like gets his playing. You know, how important do you think that is for a teacher?
I mean, I think, I used to think that it was important for all teachers, but now it's really subjective. I mean, it's not, what works for one person doesn't always work for the other one. I've found, you know, some of my colleagues are more of a wreck when they try to perform. It's just not what they really want to be doing. So for them, that performance outlet, it doesn't really make them happy. The teaching is what makes them happy, but also, like you were saying, you tend to get burnt out after a while.
Yeah.
So I really think every teacher needs to learn to step away from teaching at certain points over the year. I mean, I think every year, every teacher needs some sort of time away. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to do it your whole life. Or maybe you can, but you're not going to, I mean, it's just not going to be healthy. So I think a healthy way to teach is to take time away from teaching. Now, for me personally, as far as the playing aspect of it, I couldn't live without some performing.
Right.
I think that's,
You'd lose your mind.
I mean, I love it. Yeah.
Right.
And the more I perform, the more I love it. So it has to be, for me, it has to be an integral part of what I do all the time. And what I find is that if the teaching goes, my level of teaching, I should say the amount of teaching that I do goes up, and the balance starts to, you know, sway, then I'm less happy as a person and I'm more cranky. So I always have to work to keep, and I have to realize that for myself too. So if I try to, you know, there's always that allure of taking one more student, because that's a little bit more money.
Right.
But more money doesn't equal more happiness, because more money often equals less time for yourself and more stress, and maybe having to deal with a student that you don't really want to deal with.
Right.
So for me, I mean, I've made a ton of mistakes as a young teacher, you know, taking on students I didn't want to take or shouldn't have taken on, just because, you know, I needed needed the money, wanted the money, whatever.
Right.
So, getting a little bit older has helped me to be a little bit more discerning in what I can handle, what I want to take as a teacher, as far as students go. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that does, because I was under the impression that that's a good way to put it, that everybody needs that thing, but this really is pretty subjective, because you're right. I mean, you have your whole thing in your life of a mini day job, and then you have your students, and then you're saying, I need this playing outlet, but do you have time? That's kind of one thing you got to take into consideration.
Well, yeah, and one of my mentors really helped me to understand that, because as I'm trying to figure out as a young person who does music what direction I want my career to take. And I've been challenged to really think hard about that, because there's a lot of different directions you as a musician can take. And you have different tiers that you can aspire to. And when you're super young, like a teenager, everybody has that little bit of a dream of being something rock, like a rock star, and whether it's a classical musician who's famous or something like that, but it's never super clear. So then as you get older, you kind of clarify first of all, what's realistic, and second of all, where you actually want to be happy. And some music teachers, they find that when they're not teaching, it makes them happy to cook, or when they're not teaching, it makes them happy. One of my colleagues who has I won't name names, but she's a fantastic person and a great musician, but she finds her outlet in sports, doing physical activity, and that's what she does outside of her teaching, and I really, really admire that. But the performing thing is not that outlet outside of teaching.
Yeah, that's a good point, because it wouldn't always be that for everyone. What's going to make them have the not energy, but have the motivation to come back and teach really well, is because they've done their thing outside. You said something about goals that was really interesting, because I think most of us are as the teacher, pretty good at setting goals for the student. We have, okay, here's your piece, all right, we have a recital, here's our next scale. We're good at setting goals for them, but we're pretty bad at setting goals for ourselves, right?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, that was awesome, and I've been dealing with this learning some politics lately of people being, you mentioned that word being broad, just too broad, and what the problem is or what the solution's going to be, and so what. Can you talk a little bit more about that of teachers and goals? What do you mean by that of goals?
Well, I think a lot of times when we want to do something, it's more within our grasp than we think it is, as long as we clarify in really great detail what it is we're trying to do. I think a lot of dreams that musicians have often go unfulfilled because of just that lack of attention to detail. And sometimes we have unrealistic dreams because we haven't worked out all the details. And the more detail you go into, either you bring that goal down to a more realistic level, or you take it up and you realize, oh, if I just do this, and this, maybe I'll get to, what I'm saying? I've just set more detailed, specific goals for myself as I get older. And it can be anywhere from all right, what ratio of my income do I want to be from performing, and what ratio of it do I want to be from teaching? That's a goal. Right? And it doesn't have to be outrageous. It can be okay, I want 20% of my income to be from teaching every month, and I want the other 80% to be from teaching. Is that realistic? I mean, probably, right? Where do I want to be in 5 years? Okay, well, I want 40% of my income to be from performing and only 60% of it to be from teaching. And just realizing that, okay, I got 5 years to do this. Now, how am I going to do that? And what am I going to do this month to get there in 5 years?
Right.
Yeah, just things like that. Or how many students do I want to be teaching? What type of teacher do I want to be? Do I want to be... A lot of people don't even clarify that. It's do you want to be somebody who teaches primarily grade school kids? Do you want to teach high school kids?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to teach competitive?
Right.
Do you want to be an adjunct teacher at a college? Do you want to be a full-time professor? And how are you going to get there if you want to get there?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to get to there by being a really good performer, or are you going to get there by being a well-known pedagogue? You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's all kinds of paths you can take and places you can end up, but not knowing where you want to be, I think, is sometimes where people run into trouble.
Mm-hmm. That's really great because I know that definitely I can relate to what you said about I'm gonna be an awesome gigger in town. You know what I mean? What the hell does that mean?
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know, I mean that's really broad. You know,
Yeah.
and so like, and definitely one thing. My mom's actually a teacher too, and she was trying to talk to me about the types of students that I really want, and this is the ideal. You know, well, eventually I want, you know, and like every other teacher, I want all motivated kids, right? You know, okay, great, you know, that, and that's the ideal, of course, but she was talking about the where am I marketing part, and she's like, well, you need to go talk to the youth symphonies, you need to go talk to maybe a lot of the homeschooled parents, you need to get, you know, you need to go start looking in a different spot than Craigslist, you know, as your only thing, because you know, and again, there's exceptions in all of those groups, but in general, you can make a pretty strong argument that most of the people at the youth symphony are pretty committed in general, you know, and so a lot of times there's exceptions to this, but the homeschool, you know, parents are generally fairly committed too in general. And so she was talking to me about you can't know where to look before you set that goal, right? I mean, or that helps a lot to have the goal, and then that tells you where you need to go.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
So I just like that you said that, and I think everybody needs to be more clear on everything.
Yeah.
You know, I like, and instead of so broad. Good. So the one that really has been getting me, and this has been almost a 5-year annoyance to me, or ever really since I started teaching, is the idea of motivation and the idea of motivating students. And a lot of times I think I get myself in trouble of thinking too idealistically or philosophically too much. And so with the motivating students, I'm just not a teacher that can just let it go and just take the money and just have the student, okay, whatever, all right, see you next week. You know, I can't do that. And and I think that's one of the reasons that's making me a decent teacher, is because I do care a lot. And you talk to me for 5 seconds, you can tell that I'm very passionate about it. But when I'm sitting there, I think about the idea of how much control I really have over the situation right now. And so, like, can you just talk some general thoughts that you have in your head about motivating students, or maybe like setting expectations, or like any kind of motivation towards students? Do you have any
Well, you
thoughts
talked
on
about there's different types of motivators for different ages of students. So that's really important to recognize that. You know, if candy might work for a little kid, but it's not going to work for a teenager, right? They're just going to blow you off like, what's wrong with you? You know.
You think I'm a third
right. What do you think I am for?
Right,
You can bribe me with candy. So I think there's two things that come to mind when we talk about motivation. For children, let's say under the age of 13, 12 maybe, patience on the teacher's part, and motivating the parents. For me, those two things are really important. Motivating the parents and having patience as a teacher, because you're right, there's only so much you can do. So I try to cultivate a lot of patience within the piano lesson. When they don't, every kid has a different learning pace. So some kids are going to learn faster, some kids are going to learn slower. And this has taken me a long time to understand. Well, I mean, you know, you kind of know it on a theoretical level, but until you really experience it, it's a lot different. So, for example, I've had this one student for, I don't know, maybe 4 years, and it's taken her about 4 years to really get to a point where her note reading is at at a more comfortable level where she doesn't struggle with her note reading. And this was a transfer student, which they often have, you know, some issues that you kind of have to work through. But if I didn't, you know, if I didn't have that patience, I probably would have given up a long time ago. But sticking through it for those years, and that was years,
Right.
you know, of just working with this student to get to that place. And if I had been impatient, I think my student would have been more impatient and lost the motivation. There were highs and there were lows, and there was a lot of discouragement, and there was, you know, I could tell there was that feeling of, I don't know if I want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
But I think having that passion as a teacher is really important, and expressing that patience and that always a little bit of love, no matter where they're at or what they're going through, can sometimes get those students through tough times. And motivating them to practice, I think you always got to have some fun in the lesson, so that they have a good memory of playing music. I think if you get too hard on them in their lesson, then they have negative feelings every time they sit down.
Yeah.
One of the things that I heard recently from another teacher was, I thought it was really good advice, is, now I'm kind of blanking on it, but, is to talk to the parents about encouraging their kids, because I think a lot of parents will tell their kid, you gotta go practice now, you have to go practice. We're paying for your lessons, go sit down and practice your piano for your lesson. Yeah. I mean,
you know, they're gonna get on them,
It's just like a thing you have to go make your bed.
Right.
But, so kind of training those parents to do less of that, and to try to make music with their children, or be kind of a cheerleader for them.
Right.
So like, instead of doing that, like when the kid does sit down to play, saying, that was really good, I really like that song, can you play it again? And the kid then finds that they're getting almost like a verbal reward for doing something good, and they're going to want that again. What you call it, what you want, Pavlovian training or whatever, but it works, right? If you give somebody praise, then that makes them feel good, and they want to do it again. So, but I mean, there's so many different things you can do to motivate students. A lot of working with the parents. I think going back to that aspect of praise, when a student does well on their assignments, I think praising the parents makes them feel good. For the praising them for the work that they did with their student over the week helps them to want to help their student.
Yeah, so now you're praising the parent, not the kid.
Right. Because and it also I found that sometimes when parents are not as engaged as you want them to be, giving them that compliment anyway implies to them that they should be involved and that they should be helping their student, and I found that it actually helps them to want to do it more. So encouraging that parent by giving them the praise of, I'm so glad that you were working with, Lucy this week, or whatever, or Tommy this week. It's good to see that, so keep working with them, and they want to do that
so
more.
on that, that's another part. You're mentioning a part of the motivation where how much praise do you do, right? And how much tear down, and how much praise, or how much tear down is a stupid word, but so you're talking to the parents, and you have you've assessed in the last the last lesson that, they pretty much did zero, right? I mean, you can tell, right? They're worse than they were last week, right? So, that you can tell the parents done zero. Yeah. And so you're sitting there at that moment where you tell them, you're now praising the parent, even though they didn't do anything. Do you think that some people are going to take that as a kind of, I'm trying to, basically stick it to them? Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, if they don't practice at all, I try not to do that.
Right, yeah.
But would they take it as like I was being sarcastic, or I was like implying something? Or?
No, meaning like, I'm sounding genuine right now. They don't think I'm lying, but they know in their head I've done nothing, and now I'm praising them. And do you think that they could get like resentful of that in the long run? I mean, see, I'm going way too psychology into it right now, but Like that's the kind of mind games that I'm unfortunately in my head all the time. But so irrelevant from that. But you've been talking a lot about the parents,
A
about
lot about
parents
the parents.
being a huge part of this.
Yeah, they're a huge part. Their attitude often shapes how the kid views the music lessons. If they view it as just something you got to do, and I mean, every dynamic with each parent child is different. Some kids are much more independent. Some kids really rely on their parents for modeling. So if that's the case, then they're gonna need more of that. Yeah, it's really a case by case basis, but understanding that one size does not fit all is, I think, important as well. Making sure that you also when I try to get a student to, I'm trying to get them to practice more. Um, Unless it's a very young child, 7 or under, and that's all parents.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
all the parents.
Yeah, I agree.
But I mean, maybe even 9, and up. I try to give them more control over their decision making, because that's kind of where they're at. They want to, like,
You mean the kid or the parent?
yeah, the kids. They
kid,
want it to
yeah.
be their decision. They don't want to be told what to do. So I'll ask them, when they don't play, when they whatever wherever their piece is at, really. I ask them, well, what do you think you need to do this week to make this piece better? And then when it comes out of their own mouth, then it's their decision and their thought process and their conclusion that, oh, well, my piece isn't smooth enough, I need to really work on
Right.
smoothness, or it's not as fast as it should be. All right, well, you said that, so maybe you probably should do
Right.
it.
Yeah. I know I do a bad job with that a lot because I love talking, and I know I have, quite a bit of music, expertise in my head, so I feel like I need to tell them all the time. I'm telling, and you just mentioned now you're not telling anymore, right? I mean, it's their idea. It's their, yeah. I
It
like
really,
that.
I mean, I think most kids have more musical innate sense than they think they do. It's just pulling it out of them, and if you just give them a little bit of information, they'll run with it. And so, yeah, trying to talk less in lessons is something that I try to do more of.
I'm so bad at that. I'm so bad at that. And she keeps telling me that too. I need to stop talking. Play it again. Stop talking.
Yeah, and it gets worse with teenagers because they don't listen to anything.
You're right.
Yeah, so in that case, I mean, I have a couple of quiet teenagers, but
Yeah. So okay. So you said something else interesting too about the fun of it, and you're mentioning how, I mean, all of us have seen at least 10 people in our life that. Because this is what happens to me at every single gig. I get up there and everybody goes, "Oh yeah, man! In 4th grade, I played viola, and it was yeah." And then before they get done talking, what I want to say, yeah, and then you quit. I'm trying to finish their sentence for them because I'm like, this is what happens to everybody. They start, and I think the number one reason why people quit is because it wasn't fun. That's what I've felt. They had some teacher that was just Nazi drill sergeant on them, and it wasn't fun. And then of course years later they wish they would have stayed with it, but like, so that's what kind of the ultimate question to me is, how much drill and how much fun, it's just this balance, and I'm probably not at all special in this annoyance of this question. I mean, it's probably everyone has to deal with this.
The age-old problem.
And so like, so with the what again with my goals as a teacher, the thing that is annoying to me is if I'm not going to be a teacher that just takes the money and good Billy, okay, see you next week, and if I'm not going to do that, I'm trying to figure out what the purpose of this lesson is for them. And so with me, it was always really easy because I had started at 3 years old. I mean, this is like, I was deep into it, as deep as you could possibly get it. And now, writing rock albums and playing every genre known to man and teaching and playing, and so I'm like deep into this, but I understand that they're not, every kid is not deep into it.
Right.
And so like, so then that leads me back to the question of, okay, again, what is the point of this? Because every single parent comes up to me and they go, well, we know he's not going to be in the symphony, but blah, 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 you know, and so I'm like, okay, so they're making it really clear that drilling them on the stupid C sharp, you know, is not the purpose of this right now. So that leads me to the conclusion of all of the non-musical things that music is great for. Learning to not make excuses, you mentioned earlier, you know, learning time management, learning, you know, all of these other things, you know, learning skills to be up in front of people, like a public speaking kind of you know. So like that always leads me back to like every single problem that happens in a lesson to me is something non-musical. Every single musical thing, like especially if they're making excuses, this has nothing to do with music. They make excuses. How much money you want to bet that their homework they make excuses too, you know? So like I could go down the line. I mean, every single one, them not practicing, that's a discipline thing. It's nothing to do with music. They just have no discipline.
Yeah.
So when I try to come at those things, I feel like now I'm verging on life coach. I'm verging on therapy session. And everybody hates therapy session, you know, so I don't know if you have really an answer to this, but this is my idealist coming out, and then I'm trying to figure out how to balance those things, because I love psychology and I think it's so fascinating. But with the motivation, I'm trying to make the motivation back to, at least for the parent, what are we doing this for? What's the purpose of this, you know? And so, I mean, like, what's your thought on, like, these lessons really like being a therapy set? I mean, do you ever find that?
Yeah, I mean, well, you talked about like if something's going wrong in their lessons, whether it's like they're not practicing or they're, you know, having trouble with something in the music. It's I think it's an opportunity to look deeper into how our, you know, emotionally, you know, mentally, physically, all of those outlets, they all have something to do with how we play music. And I think for a lot of students, it's really fascinating for them to see how synthetic all of those things are, for one, when it comes to playing music. And as far as like therapy, I think, you know, I don't think it's always the teacher's place to be a therapist, and I think that always needs to be made clear to the student. Is like, you're here to play music. If you need help with something, I'm going to be there for you, right? And I'm going to help you with this as much as I can. But like, it's not my main goal to be your therapist. So I don't know. And if I don't know if I'm doing the right
that's and. It's unfortunate for me that I love psychology so much that I'm almost wanting to be you know, I mean, and that's bad, you know, it's a bad thing, because I just see how I could help. I mean, to me, it's the diagnosing part is the easy part to me. I don't know if it's just me, but like, you know, any of us can go listen to this whole line and go, yeah, the C sharp and measure 3. You know, I mean, we can just pinpoint it in 1 second, of what the problem was. And even psychologically, I think most therapists, you can come in and in 4 seconds they can find out, this dude's angry. You know, I mean, the diagnosis is not the problem. It's the figuring out what the hell I'm going to do about that.
Right. Well, like, I've had some students have had pretty serious nerve problems. You know, in their performance, or even just coming into a lesson and playing
in front of you,
in front of me. And that right there is, you know, an opportunity to kind of dig deeper and figure out why. But that's not easy to do. And so like there you do have to play sort of a therapist and a counselor, because how are they going to be able to play music if they're so nervous?
See, that's the question that I keep asking myself. That's the thing about kids talking in lesson. I mean, it says nothing to do with lesson. This kid likes to talk all the time. And I mean, we can't even do a lesson right now. Like, the whole purpose of screw whatever purpose you are doing, the whole purpose is to like actually have a lesson. That's number one, right? So, but we can't do a lesson because he's talking the whole, you know, so like, you know, so, I mean, some of those things, like, that's where I'm at, is that some of those things absolutely have to be addressed, right? I mean, there's some that I'm wanting to address them, but they're not on priority, you know, the talking in lesson is
Yeah.
It's got to stop. I mean, we can't even do a lesson.
But maybe,
you know?
on the therapy side or counseling side, maybe the reason that kid is talking so much, partly because he loves to talk, maybe he doesn't have a lot of people that listen
Yeah.
to him.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why he has to talk to you so much,
Maybe.
because there's not people that listen to him. So then it's like, well, how much do you balance letting him talk, because this
Right.
actually helps him to like enjoy his lessons and his
Right.
playing music, because he knows that this is an opportunity where he does feel valued, versus how much music are you actually going to play in the lesson?
Right. Because that's again where I go back to, like you just mentioned, like him now having an outlet to talk to like an adult and or anybody. Well, see, that's where I go back to. Is this important that he turns out to be a symphony player? Because no offense to him, but he's done.
Yeah.
I mean, he's too
Right.
far behind. I mean, I played 31 years and I'm not good enough. I mean, there's so that goes back to what are we doing this for again? Is this, if this person doesn't learn anything, but they get to a point where they could actually play in front of people, how worth it is that for their whole entire life? So all these non-musical skills I think are so important, because like that's, if I can teach them a little bit better to be a little bit more detailed oriented, because that's something that
Yep.
I mean, you can't even start to argue that in music. I mean,
Yep.
that's all we do is details.
Yep.
So like that's kind of where I'm at, of just kind of balancing the amount of talking I'm doing, balance the amount of like worrying about all of their psychological things happening, and then their music, and I'm just like, I'm just still kind of like, and then the other ones is this one I had the other day. I realized that, boy, her self-esteem is done. I mean, it's pretty low. I could tell from her, and I realized that I'm not sure how much I'm really going to be able to raise this. I can destroy this pretty bad. I can destroy this self-esteem in her right now, but I'm not sure how much I'm really going to be able to raise it. So is this a wasted, my worrying about her self-esteem, is this a wasted effort right now of all this worrying I'm doing about it?
Right.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, it's hard to say.
Right.
And,
Right.
what's your opinion about, this is another one in regards to this topic, is that it is driving me nuts about how much control I have of everybody being in soccer, taekwondo, scouts, music, and then robotics, and and this is again back to how much control do you have? Because when I try to address this, now I'm verging on life coach. Now I'm verging on like not screwing up their life, but really like manipulating their life right now. If I'm
Yeah.
gonna try it, what's your opinion about kids being in?
So in terms of like dealing with their schedule, or trying to tell them how much they should or shouldn't do?
Well, yeah, any of that. I mean, because it's all a big problem. I mean,
Yeah.
so my idea is that, well, I know, again, back to the diagnosing. Well, you're in 5 activities. You know what I mean? The reason why you're not good is, took me 2 seconds to figure that out.
Right.
You're in 10 activities,
Well,
and you suck at all of them. It's
Right.
like you're not focusing on. I don't even care if you do this. You need to be in 3, not 5.
Right.
So that's again. But what is my place to say something?
Yeah, I mean, and then this gets even more difficult when they get older. But when they're young, and that's happening, you gotta maybe just address it with the parents. I had one parent a number of years back say I think they were stopping piano lessons after about 2 or 3 years, I think, because she decided that was enough music lessons for them. And I was really surprised by that, because they really hadn't gotten beyond a really beginner level. And I mean, we parted, on good terms, but she told me, I think at the last lesson, I'd really like my kids to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. And it really surprised me to hear a parent say that. They really actually didn't want
Master
their
of
kids.
none.
They didn't want their kids to be good at anything. They just wanted them to dabble in a little bit of everything, which was kind of the opposite of the upbringing that I had. Is that you pick something that you want to do, or a couple of things, and you do it really. You go as far as you can with that, right? Because it was a matter of commitment, it taught you commitment, um, dedication, um, long suffering, whatever you want to call it,
Long
patience.
suffering.
Just being able to endure a lot of hardship over time and come out on the other end with success.
It's discipline. Yeah, right,
Discipline,
right.
but also,
So then
so,
you make, you can make your 30-page argument,
right,
right, about this is really good because da 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 da,
Right,
and then you're sitting here at this moment where they
right, and
don't give a
there
crap.
wasn't really a point in debating it because they were done with lessons,
Right,
but it
right.
made me think. I mean, I remembered that for all these years past, that must not be unique to that parent. That a lot of parents might think that. So if there's ever, I mean, I don't really make it an issue unless the parents say, so and so's not making progress. If they're doing a bunch of activities, I'm going on the basis that they're not going to expect that they're going to make it very advanced while they're doing all these activities.
Right.
But if they raise the issue, oh, they just don't seem to be making progress, I usually just kind of counter with, well, let's take a look at the schedule. How much time are they able to block off with their practice?
Right. Because that's a parent-student time management issue to me.
Yeah.
Again, it's not a music problem. You're in too many activities and you're not as a parent and the fourth grader or whatever it is. You guys need to sit down and map it out.
And it's amazing. Some fourth graders literally they get up, they go to school. I mean, they get up, they have time for breakfast, they go to school, they do their after-school activities. They do whatever their parents. And then 6 o'clock they have dinner, and then it's time for bed. And are you really going to make a fourth grader, after that long of a day, sit down at 6 or 7 o'clock when they're tired and make them practice for a half hour? It's like, can
Their
you really
brain's done.
expect that?
I mean,
Yeah, so sometimes when kids say they don't have time, it's really amazing
It's
for
hard,
me
yeah.
that I never said that as a kid. I never said I didn't have time to practice.
Right.
But some kids literally don't have time
Yeah,
these
right.
days, and it's not their fault at all.
Right.
So approaching it from that.
See again, and that goes back to another thing of a lot of times you talked about parents. This kid just is a great kid. He loves everything. I mean, he loves playing sports and music, and so it's really the kid at that point going, I want to be in all these things. And then is that now a parent's job to set the boundary? You're like, well, I love this, but you need to pick 3 instead of 6. I mean, you need to I love that you're doing a music thing, a sports thing, a robotics where it's only brain kind of, without any physical,
Yeah.
And so now, or it's the other way where the parent is going, no, you're going to do all these things. And so to me, either way comes back to the parent, it comes back to their, dropping the ball or whatever you want to call it, and so you said something interesting about what I want to do is I want to pipe up and give my 2 cents even though they didn't ask it. That's what I want to do. And you just said, maybe wait till they're annoyed. Right, the parents like, well, he's not progressing. Well, if you want my opinion, I'll give you my 10-page argument on why I think these are the best way.
Right. And if I see that the kid is still enjoying, if my student is still enjoying lessons in piano and really wants to do it, regardless of the lack of time, I'll usually stick with them because I think there's something of value in that. I mean, at least that's where I am as a teacher right now. My goals or whatever for where I want to be as a teacher later on might change that, but for now, just to transfer, like you said, not every kid is going to be a professional musician, and I'm okay teaching those kids that aren't going to be professional musicians, as long as I see some progress. Eventually, if there's no time to practice, it's just gonna be a frustration every week.
Right.
And then there's been times where I've had to encourage students, look, if you really want to make progress at this point, moving forward, you're either gonna have to practice or you might want to just consider taking a break for a while.
Right,
and
right.
I don't think there's any shame in saying that. It just has to be said, diplomatically and, straightforwardly.
Yeah, I definitely have a problem with doing my my ex-girlfriend called it the come to Jesus meeting, where it's like and what I was trying at first to do with the parent and the student, have this come to Jesus meeting like every week, and I needed to stop that. I needed to have, you have it and you've said your piece, and then you gotta, as a teacher, you just can't keep having this every single week. I mean, and that's the stop talking so much, kind of stuff.
And then you can also just ask them questions, if they're frustrated, and this is especially with students that have been with me for a while. I'll just ask them. I'll be like, okay, what do you need to do to improve this week?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I often say is, well, I need to practice more. I'm like, you said it, not me. And so if they come back next week and they haven't practiced, I'll ask them about it. I'll be like, well, didn't you say you needed to practice a little bit more this week? Did you do it?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And then it puts the responsibility on them, because they are the ones that set that goal for themselves.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I wasn't going to ask you this, but this is actually a really good question. So, like I said, motivation and the stuff is the stuff that's been kind of in my head recently. What's been in your head recently about teaching, or is there been anything frustrating or epiphany or anything that you've been thinking about? Or
I wish I had more epiphanies.
Yeah.
I think just being really expressing passion and excitement in every single lesson, and not harping on my students too much, has been something that I've been trying to do a lot in the past year. I harp when I need to, but in a way, I always
harp
try
when
to.
I need to.
Yeah, I try to be funny about it. I try to harp on them in a way that it's like, I'm gonna say this, and I gotta say this,
Right.
and that you gotta do this.
Right.
You know that I'm gonna tell you to practice, but hey, you already knew that, so I'm not saying anything you don't already know. And they're just cracking a joke about it, so that they have a good feeling about, being ragged a little bit. Yeah, I think just being, for so many years as a young teacher, I always thought of it as something I had to do but I hated. And embracing it as part of my life, and valuing that dissemination of knowledge, for me has been huge, because it's made me really enjoy and just really liking interacting with people. Like, I like people in general, but viewing my students as just more people that I get to interact with and develop relationships with and have fun, working with, and viewing myself as less of a teacher but more of a guide that just helps them bring out what they already have within them. It changes my perspective on things, and it makes me a better teacher. So
that's cool. Yeah. And you said a guide, and that's interesting, because I had this student, this mother, and she told me, she goes, I'm so glad you're in my son's life, because he doesn't have anybody like you in his life. And I think what she meant by that was my exact personality of how passionate I am, and definitely being not less manly, but talkative and in the arts. And I think his stepdad was not like me at all. A typical, typical guy. Music is stupid. I mean, kind of a really Superman's man. And the fact that I was so passionate and stuff, I think she really liked to have somebody like that in her son's life. And that kind of gets back to what I was saying about what's the point of this right now. Well, to her, it really wasn't music anymore. It was about what am I to this kid? What kind of a role model am I under this kid?
Yeah.
And I didn't even consider that when she's, before she said that. And I thought that was a really neat compliment that she said. But I didn't ever consider that again, back to kind of this purpose. What is our point of, and what do you think about, I thought about this the other day, and it made me actually really, really sad, but I thought about the idea of when we were in orchestra, we have elementary, and there's a ton, right? There's 100 over the South District of kids. You get to middle school, and there ends up being, 30 or in each class, so like maybe 60 kids total or something in the middle school. Then you get to high school and it's like 30 in each grade, you know. So we took 1 year, it was 100. Then middle school, now we're down to 60. Then high school, it's down to 30. And I was trying to think, I mean, we had a really good class. And I mean, we had a pretty strong class in our grade anyways. And now I'm hearing that there might be like 3 of us. 2 of us are doing music professionally, like me and another guy. And then another girl I know is still playing. But I was trying to do that math. And I mean, I don't know if you're following my math here, like 100, 60, 30, 3, you know, and so that was like, that made me sad, you know, to see that number of is this seriously down to 3 people now that are doing this professionally? And so, like, again, I keep saying the same crap, but this is why I'm frustrated by, what are we doing? You know, what is this for now? Is this to teach people's brains to do the creative math together? Is this because of self-discipline? Is this excuses? Is it, you know, so I don't know. I'm
It's
just
all
like,
those things, I
yeah,
think,
you know.
but another thing it does is it creates audiences for us.
That's a great point.
Because if you don't play music,
Who's coming?
who's
Yeah.
right? If
Yeah.
you, when I go to concerts, a lot of those people in the audiences are musicians themselves, or let's just say amateur. You know, they
Yeah.
like music because they played it when they were a kid. They learned a guitar. They you know, listen to a lot of music now because they played music. It kind of got them more interested in it, and then they decided they didn't want to keep playing, but they still want to have music in their life. So they're the ones that go to the shows.
They're knowledgeable.
They're knowledgeable
You know.
just to the point where they can appreciate, right? And there's a lot of people that, I would say, if you play an instrument, it's going to make you infinitely more interested in listening to
Sure.
music later on in your life. So I think that's really important too. Coming back to what you said about like how many people continued on with music, I knew a ton of kids who played music, and as far as I know, like there's maybe a couple that do it professionally now,
Right.
besides me. But a lot of them were really, really good musicians, and a lot of the really good musicians ended up not doing it for a living. But I still think there was value in them having done that, because they appreciate music a lot now.
Mm-hmm.
It gave them something that they can do as a hobby in their adult life,
Right.
and they're probably more successful in the other things that they do in life because of those music lessons. So, you know, I don't think there's anything lost in them not being musicians. So I think we have to, because that made me really sad too, to hear like that, you know.
Yeah.
I had dinner with an old friend of mine from high school a couple of years ago, and he was just smiling from ear to ear to hear that I was doing music for a living,
Right.
because he thought that he was probably going to do music at some point too. And he said, you know, you're the only person I know from high school that ended up being a professional musician.
And I guess when I mention those 3 people, I'm talking about deep in it, you know, the people that are doing it like 100% for a career like I am. And so I think my numbers might not be off, because I'm talking to all 30 of those people. I don't know what they're doing, you know, so there might have been more, you know, there might have been people who are doing what I'm doing, where they're not doing classical, but they're screwing around in a rock band with their violin, you know, and that's stuff, you know, that's something to do with your, so anyway, I just thought I would share that with a lot of different teachers, because it's really been annoying me about me taking my work home with me and worrying about this big concept of how much control do I really have over them practicing, how much control do I have of how many activities they're in, and 100 other things you could mention of what I really I can motivate, and I can try to motivate, you know, but at the end of the day, I don't have any control over that. I have personal responsibility of what I can do, but it's just definitely frustrating. We're almost out of time, actually. It's gone fast, but got one last question for you. Do you have any other any other kind of funny lessons that have happened over your life, or funny gigs, or just crazy moments in the music business? Because everybody loves gig stories.
Well, there's one from high school that I don't know. It's only ever happened to me once ever, and it was so I was gonna play a concerto with an orchestra. I'd won a concerto competition as a high school
Oh,
student,
cool. Yeah.
and I went to go rehearse with the orchestra. I was one of the community orchestras, and we lived about, I want to say, an hour and 20 minutes away. So my mom, they had an evening rehearsal because it's a bunch of amateur musicians, and my mom drove me up one night to go to this rehearsal for my big concert, and when I got there, they had forgotten a piano. So we drove almost an hour and a half to this, it was huge for me. It was my first ever performance with an orchestra. Get there and there's literally no piano.
So they forgot a piano?
They forgot a piano. They just
Lordy.
they forgot to book the piano, and we get there and it was a mess. It was an absolute mess. So, that was probably the weirdest.
What, so you sat there and
experience.
airplayed with them?
Yeah, no,
Jeez.
we just had to go home. We just had to go home, and so it wasn't the best. It wasn't the best performance I ever gave because of that. But
was that the only practice that you got?
Yeah.
For that?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
But as far as student stories, I've had some really funny things happen. One of my I remember, so there's the always the age-old question of passing gas in a lesson. If a student passes gas, what do? Do you acknowledge it, or do you not
Right,
acknowledge
that's
it?
funny. Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Right? So I had this one student one time, she was really little, and oh my goodness. So she accidentally passed one in her lesson, and the whole rest of the lesson, she just stares at me. She's like,
That is funny, yes.
Yeah.
She was super embarrassed and she didn't.
Yep. But on the other side of the coin, I've had little kids, no filter. They just straight out blurt, "Did you fart?" So I love little kids. My little kid experiences are awesome.
That's fun. Yeah. I know those are. That's what's so fun, and that's what can't remember. Oh, Jim Calhoun. He's the basketball coach for UConn, but he was talking about you cannot treat all of them the same. You can't. They're all completely different, right? This one is really vocal and this other one is super quiet, and this other one tries really hard, and that one doesn't do anything. It's he was talking about you can't treat all of and he was talking about his players, but it's the same point. You just can't treat them all the same. They're not even close to the same, right? And that's one last thing I'll share is that's what I'm trying to do now as well, is trying to come up with backup plans and come up with another way. Whatever moment we're having, I felt like a one-trick pony with even up till a year or two ago, and there wasn't another way. I had only one way, and when that didn't work, I'm screwed, And so I tried to figure out how to adjust myself a little bit. Has been hard for me, but anyway, tell everybody about your what's the name of your little group again?
Casey Young Musicians Roundtable. So we have a Facebook page, or a Facebook group, Casey Young Musicians Roundtable. We have a once a month meeting every second Friday of the month, and you can go on to Facebook and join our group, get notifications for our events. In the future, I'm hoping to kind of expand that to maybe some workshops,
That'd be fun.
additional events that I can host for the roundtable, and kind of expand my offering to all these musicians in town who really I think could benefit from it, whether you're classical or jazz or rock or whatever it is you do. If you're really committed to self-improvement and development of your craft, I think these things would be really really awesome for our community. So
Yeah, that's really great, and I love the idea of just the networking in general, because all of us get calls for all sorts of stuff all the time. I mean, and so getting to know people never hurts anything.
oh yeah,
really.
and like when somebody posts, hey, I don't know any keyboard players for whatever, it makes me sad because it's like, how many pianists are there in this town? You shouldn't have a problem finding
sure,
somebody.
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's a great resource. It's really neat that you're doing that. I don't know anybody else who's doing anything like that. So that's really neat.
Yeah.
This is Bridget Clonts. It's fun talking to you.
Thanks for having me.
This has been KC Music Talk. We are done. We're getting out of here. We will have more musicians, more teachers, and we'll have some more shows like this talking about all sorts of stuff. So, all right, see you guys later.